Awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Ashley, the co-founder of VNTANA. And for those who don't know, we're a 3D asset management platform. We make it easy to publish 3D everywhere. And we work with tons of different 3D assets, including a lot of 3D scans, particularly from CoVision Media. So really excited to have Franz on our LinkedIn Live this morning. So welcome.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
Awesome. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, how you got into this, and what makes CoVision different? You guys, built hardware and software, which I know is a huge task as someone who built hardware at a past company. So, tell us more about CoVision Media and the scanning you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, we as a company got into this, and me myself, by first coming out of basically AI, computer vision, machine learning research. So basically, the research side of the images together with AI, and we did this for a bunch of years. And also, we saw several pain points there. One of them was actually, how to create 3D assets at scale at the highest quality possible, let's say. Of course, lots of work still to do and lots of work has been done. This is how we got to the space, and we saw an opportunity in automating 3D scanning as much as possible. And that's how CoVision Media came together. And yeah, we are a company that actually makes the hardware. So we make the scanners, and we wrote the software that goes along with those scanners. And the vision of the company is to make it as easy as possible for many brands, retailers, and many different companies to just put in an object, press one button, and at the end of the day, you have highest quality 3D asset that can be used then on platforms like VNTANA to delight end customers.
Awesome. And so taking a step back, because, we've got people joining with all different levels of 3D experience. So, what is the difference between 3D scanning and photogrammetry? Are they somewhat interchangeable? I feel like everyone uses the words interchangeably now, so who knows? But kind of what's the difference? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and of course there's several levels of definition. I mean, I don't want to get too scientific, but in general, I mean, there's several ways to get to a 3D model of an object. One of them is actually, okay, starting from the ground, you just build it basically from scratch. I would say that's generally referred to as CGI. That of course plays a role as well, but that's not what we're talking about today. Then you have different methods, I would say, of 3D scanning, and I would say one of them is photogrammetry. So this is actually why we came into the market, to kind of really push way beyond what was possible beforehand. So photogrammetry, I would say, is just stitching images together. So you have actually to have lots of images in a somewhat controlled way, somewhat controlled form from different angles, that then by software, which can be proprietary or openly available software, that is then stitched together to a 3D model. That has its advantages, of course, as you teased this webinar as well. It's rather easy, rather fast. I mean, there's many phone applications out there as well. I think even Apple has their own application. You can just go around an object and it automatically creates a 3D model. Now, when we speak to many companies in the industry where it's actually about mass production of content in a reliable way, you want the highest quality, because of course then you want to take that asset and maybe derive different contents from it. I think you have to go a bit beyond what is possible just with pure photogrammetry. That's what we then focus on. So when looking at the 3D model, now to go a bit deeper, you always look at the geometry, let's say, in a simple way, and then at the appearance. Photogrammetry, again, is fast, but maybe lacks in both a bit. So what we did is actually we tried to force those two workflows from a software perspective to the maximum with classical methods, not too heavily, relying on AI. So the first one, we leverage something that's called structured light. It's actually an industrial application as well. You project structured light or patterns onto an object that you want to scan, and then you take multiple images from there. Of course, you get very accurate geometry. That is always a good baseline for a 3D model. Then to also have high quality in terms of appearance, and there we leverage something called photometry. Maybe to make it very simple, we measure the reflection of the light from the object in a very accurate way, and then we match those two, and we have a high quality 3D model. Of course, there's many variables. There's still lots of work to do, especially on very, let's say, transparent surfaces, like my glasses, for instance, or highly reflective ones as well. There's some ways around it, but especially in those two kind of areas of, I would always call it like the challenges for the industry in terms of scale, or even edge cases for some industries. That's where I think AI research can come in and actually give us a hand in solving for those two issues, I would say.
For sure, yeah, because as you said, a lot of this is done by reflecting light and measuring that difference. So when you have something that's super shiny or see-through, it messes with those calculations, which makes sense. But yeah, super excited about what AI and ML is going to be able to do to help correct those calculations, to be able to get an accurate model. And one question, because I think you guys do a really great job at this, is sometimes with photogrammetry, you're taking images of an asset in a specific lighting. Well, often, you're wanting to take that 3D model and put it in a real-time environment. So with 3D scans, like how are you ensuring, if that shoe is lit in my room here, it's got this overhead light, but then I want to put that shoe in an environment, for a magazine that's on a beach that has totally different lighting. How does that piece work with how you
Yeah,
guys are doing
I,
scanning?
I think that's a great question, and I would almost say, the reason our company exists. I mean, if we really want to make a bold statement, is that we disentangle the light from the object for, let's say, most objects, which means that the light is not baked in, and hence, for the first time, you can relight the object. So through those photometric measurements, we get the high details, but also at the same time, the light is disentangled. Which means if you want to embed the 3D model, then let's say of a shoe or of any other object into a virtual environment that is either constructed, in, let's say, Unreal Engine, or in let's say even maybe in the future text to 3D generated environments, they naturally interact with those, and this gives this extra level of reality, I think, that every consumer is aiming for, not only in let's say e-com or in retail, but maybe also in gaming and other industries, which I think is very important. Yeah.
100%. Lighting is everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's really the benefit, and kind of the title of this talk is really, at Ventana, we think about 3D as the highest level content, because if you have a 3D model, you can automatically create every other piece of content you want. Images, videos, starting to place that object into various environments, and so that's so important. But kind of going back a little bit to what types of products work well, what don't, like what industries and products are ideal for 3D scanning and photogrammetry versus what are some that you're like, hey, you should probably create, have 3D artists create a 3D
Yeah,
asset.
yeah. I'm another great question, very practical. I would make two rather big distinctions. One is rigid object, and one is deformable object. So any object that you can deform just by your hands, that's considered generally deformable object, like a piece of clothing. Also, a shoe would be that, but you can handle it in a certain way that actually is rigid. So I would put that in a rigid category. That is one, and then it goes back. The other big distinction we have to make is basically object that actually reflect the light in a very good way. Those are very well suited for, let's say, 3D scanning, versus objects that actually, scatter the light in unpredictable ways, or even absorb it. That's very difficult. That's where I would say it's even economically better to basically build it from scratch, unless then we talk maybe later about these nerves and Gaussian splattings that are coming in. They're exciting new technologies. However, still at the researchy phase, I would say, that can help with that. So I think that's the broad distinction. Maybe to come back just to kind of talk what we do in that field. So we have basically launched two set of scanners. One is for rigid objects and one is for deformable objects. The second one came later, because we also saw that first, as a small company, we need to get one thing right. So it was maybe
Yeah.
getting rigid objects right. And to make some examples, that could be, toys, tools, shoes, and so on. And the industries that usually go well with also making that kind of investment into 3D asset that is of the highest quality, that then leads to, that asset being used in several different ways, video, photo, and in several different departments of the company. that is also important to say, which justify a certain type of investment, are usually the companies that have a high value product. So it's not typically the cable or whatever is sold for I don't know, $5 in some online store, but it's rather a product that has some value, maybe 100, $150 and above. I don't want to make a clear cut, but some high
Mhm.
value to the end consumer, where it's actually worth also making that kind of investment. That's what I would say.
That makes sense. And so yeah, like shoes, purses, great for 3D scanning, at least from like the consumer angle. I think you mentioned toys, some tools, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's making
household
sure.
items, for
Yeah.
instance, is
Hmm.
also another great category. We see this a lot happening now, especially, I think, another dimension in terms of just how many assets or how many actually real world objects need to be scanned was added with now the whole, spatial computing devices, I would say, or VR glasses or mixed reality headsets, however you want to call it, because there actually object tracking and so on becomes very important. These worlds need to be populated. The user experience needs to be very smooth, very seamless, almost like in reality. And there needs to be a certain baseline, and hence now the need for the real representation of a physical object actually, I think, has increased. Another great discussion point I would say here, Ashley, is also the size of the object. Of course, matters. I mean, it's easy for me to scan a shoe, but to scan a house, having a scanner around it wouldn't be working. So the maximum scanning volume that we, for instance, have, that is covering, I would say, 90% of, let's say, the objects that you would buy in an online store, buy online, is actually 70 by 70 by 70 centimeters. So you can think of like a large bag, to put it
Hmm.
also in terms that our American listeners can understand.
Yeah.
I unfortunately have to go with centimeters and meters.
Yeah, we always got
Yeah,
to be different.
some
But
inches.
yeah,
Yeah,
and again, yeah, and this is for extremely high accuracy, photorealistic, scanning. Whereas we work with all different types of industries, and we're working with some industrial clients who are using just 3D scanning because they need the shape and size of like an entire oil refinery or something like that, which can be done and it'll get you accurate measurements, but it's not going to look real. So those are kind of the trade-offs and the differences that we're talking about.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so going into some of the use cases, so we work with a lot of joint clients and work together because at the end of the day, you're creating amazing content and Ventana's helping to distribute it. So, we see, there everyone thinks of like the B2C use cases. So being able to publish 3D on e-commerce, Amazon, we just launched our integration, Google search. But there's also a lot from B2B companies creating sales and marketing materials to walk people through complex products, create training. I know you mentioned like XR, but yeah, how are you seeing companies really leverage this content and get great ROI out of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, of course, when companies talk to us, and it's quite an integration to bring these scanners then on site, and where do you place them? Typically, the outreach happens at the content creation level. So, the customer and customer facing applications that you mentioned, like e-com and so on. But increasingly so, we see the same content being leveraged now for B2B sales. Let's say make the case of Adidas, for instance. They of course could also potentially use those assets for selling this into a retail store before even the shoe or the object launches for the end consumer. What we're also seeing now is this going down probably to the factory level. So 3D scanning already happens basically with handheld scanners and so on in factories as well at the end of the design and prototyping phases of certain products. So let's stick with a shoe, for instance. They get designed somewhere in the world. Then you have several processes of back and forth, back and forth. But at some point, there's a design freeze, and this asset then, or this actual physical object, is being produced. That would actually be a great place also where scanning could happen, because much advanced in time, you have all your materials ready, and you can really plan for great campaigns. And then, of course, it goes without saying, you mentioned other industries that we, for instance, are not that deeply into to yet, but they need 3D assets as well. Ideally, always, of course, at the highest quality, but in some cases, maybe it's just not possible due to the nature of the object, but also maybe not needed that much, which could open up other opportunities in terms of, making this economically viable. But in general, what we try to do with our customers is go down a path of really creating that one massively valuable asset that is then actually useful for many departments within the company. It's also depending a bit on the size of the company that you work with. Sometimes these departments are closer together because the companies are smaller. Sometimes they are very far apart because the companies have tens of thousands of employees, and it's a bit more of a silo discussion. So it's not always up to us or up to the 3D asset. It's a lot
Yeah.
of other factors involved. Yeah.
Yeah, we found that too, and it's for any company, it's so important to really centralize your 3D assets so that the whole organization can use them. Because to your point, if you're, one product shot, if you're doing a line of product shots for a product, photography, the old school way, that can be around 500 bucks a product. Well, if you're doing one 3D scan, you get a beautiful 3D model that you can use for all these interactive experiences. You can automatically create all those images. Like it instantly pays for itself, as
No, no.
long as the organization is talking to each other, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, no. I think you're absolutely right, and that's what we are going for. And to be honest, it changed quite a bit. If I think back, and I mean, you have even more experience than us in this industry. Even 2 years ago, the sell or even the conversation was much different. Now this awareness is there. Companies try to make it work. They see value in three models. Of course, if you do just a one-to-one comparison, a 3D asset versus one picture, then there might be, I mean, it's not a comparison even. And we see now top management really forcing the issue top down as well, which I think in some cases helps too. The great thing is, I think workflows are not dramatically impacted. When now in the age of AI, everybody's saying, oh, AI is, completely changing this job and taking that job away and so on. I think it's just basically some sort of reskilling that is happening, and lots of the inherent knowledge about the product itself still counts a lot, and that expertise is within the companies. Especially when
Yeah.
we talk about then also relighting this object in different ways and making it actually ready for the end consumer. That same knowledge that maybe comes from a photo studio, from a videographer, from a former CGI related 3D artist and so on, absolutely needed, and that's actually a great base to start with.
Agreed. I don't know if you know Cynthia Mahler at Walmart. She leads their CGI department, and she's been there for a long time, and she is all about, hey, this isn't scary. This isn't losing people's jobs. This is about reskilling. They need our skill set, and she has been amazing at teaching her team about real time 3D, how it can be used to speed up their work, make their work more reusable as they change out different objects within a scene. So yeah, I completely agree with that. But one thing I'm gonna repeat is just how important it is to have that kind of top down. For the large companies, right? That top down understanding of how 3D content can be used. So if for us, I won't say which company, but we just launched our API integration with Amazon. So with a click of a button, you can publish thousands of 3D models, which has proven to increase your conversion rate. We were working, Amazon was like, oh, this shoe company says they don't have 3D models. And I was like, well, that's funny because they have 3,000 on the VNTANA platform. And it was just that exact use case of the design team was so far away from the Amazon team, which is completely different than the e-commerce team. So if you're giving advice to a company about how to get started in 3D, like what are some things that they should be thinking about setting up, and how should they get started?
Yeah, maybe just to this point, and then we can go to this as well. I think it's just so fascinating what you said, because I think the interoperability aspect was missing, and I'm so glad that you guys took that on and basically innovated in that area. So it becomes very easy for companies then to use the 3D models in various platform, various ways. I mean, it goes just from simple things like optimizing as well the asset itself, for mobile phone to then web to then maybe mixed reality device, and so on and so forth, without speaking even of the data asset management side. And the other component to this, I think, to make this at this stage right now, and that's why I'm so excited, finally viable to do at scale, is also that industry collaborations are happening. And I just want to highlight one that, for instance, we have started with a company called Quad. It's basically have locations all over the US, and they're a content creation studio. Now, this brings me to your question. A company doesn't need to always bring this in house right away, and go all in, basically with multi-million dollar expenses or contracts even. They can start in a gradual way. And a gradual way to start is, okay, we get some assets created by partners that are out there, that have scanners, that have other ways to do it, just to get a feel for the object itself, maybe to do some A/B testing online, or they have a small, scanning division in house and try to play around with it and try to understand the object itself. And luckily, we now got to a point where many companies have that knowledge already in house, to certain levels of depth, I would say. But especially the pandemic changed this quite a bit. I mean, 3D was then all of a sudden a viable way to go, because that is actually what allowed for collaboration on an asset that basically you could not physically work on, because nobody could travel and work on that thing themselves. So companies build now 3D departments, or smaller or bigger ones, and usually what we then say falls on a fertile ground, or what we propose falls on a fertile ground. And I think that's a good advice for companies as well. Just roll up the sleeves and get your hands dirty in a controlled way. Yes, people are speaking about POCs and so on. You could call this a POC, or do some A/B testing if it's an online integration, and try to get a bit of an understanding of the benefits that this could bring. And then maybe you go a bit larger. You measure maybe over 1 year certain ROI on your key metrics, which online could be maybe add to basket or conversion rates. Maybe in other sectors that you described before, it's some other metrics. But then you can actually measure this. And this is how you also build momentum and excitement within the company, which is, I think, very, very important. Sometimes the project gets started bottom up, which I always love the most because it's the most natural one. Sometimes, however, it's also forced top down, and it's also fine. But you need to build momentum and feel people comfortable and engaged. And actually, there's no other medium that makes you feel more engaged, because you can do so many
Yeah.
things with it, and it works well. So yeah, I'm maybe a bit romantic here, but I'm also excited, and surely you saw that shift in the industry as well. That what we are basically discussing falls on fertile grounds.
Definitely. And Quad is great. We've worked with them a lot too. They've got locations. So I think that's a good point. We talked to people who are like, I don't know, I bought this scanner offline and like it doesn't look that great. It's like, okay, well, would you hire like a wedding photographer for your company, or would you get a professional who does Vogue magazine, right? Like there's a spectrum in all of this. And so being able to start, and you can even just send your asset to a professional studio location, get a high quality 3D model, and then you can see, depending on the size of your internal team, like what could you do in house. Would you want to purchase a scanner? But yeah, I always laugh at that, because people are like, oh, the 3D doesn't look good. It's like, okay, well, that it's the same as it's an art
Yeah,
form, right? And there's some
and
really great professionals versus consumer pros. So, and same
yeah,
with the
no, you're
equipment that you
absolutely
can
right.
use.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I have to also point out that we actually learn a lot from our customers as well. Now it's incredible to see how many 3D professionals work in some of the largest companies in this world, and this impacts our product roadmap and what we develop as well in meaningful ways. And so actually, I think it's a back and forth, and that's great to see.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, like, AI and machine learning is going to impact all of this. How you've mentioned it a few times, but how do you see it changing, your business and just like the industry as a whole?
Yeah, maybe I can speak about the conference I just attended, which was CVPR, so basically Computer Vision Pattern Recognition Conference is the leading computer vision conference. Was in Seattle about 3 weeks ago. Researchers gathered there and published their latest works, and this is always where you can get a sense where is the industry going in terms of, okay, what becomes feasible, what is still far away. And there was so much work being done, great work being done at many institutions, private and public, on 3D AI. And of course, all the talk is maybe from one single image to get to a 3D model, text to 3D models. It's great from a technical perspective to see these advancements. However, seeing something that is working at the industrial scale, we might still
Mhm.
be a bit far away from it. And companies have tried, and now they are pivoting. It's a big challenge. However, I think what we see in this space is basically we leverage some properties in a very controlled way. First of all, I mean, we are, for instance, our scanners are being operated in completely blacked out space. I mean, we basically we control the light, we control everything. We have so much data. Now, bringing nerve and Gaussian splats basically in this kind of environment allows us to have a certain control over it, which is, I think, great. Especially on the 3D scanning side, you don't want AI necessarily to hallucinate certain parts of an object, whereas for text, video, audio, or just imagery, like companies that we all know, OpenAI, Midjourney, Sora, and so on. They pioneered over just the last 2 years, which of course is incredible. But their hallucination is I would say even wanted, maybe sometimes unwanted. I would say it's generally wanted and accepted to a certain degree if it's not crazy diverting from the reality. In 3D, especially when it's about representing the actual physical object, that is unwanted. However, there's other sectors, I would say gaming, for instance, where 3D assets of the
Yeah.
highest quality are needed at scale. They're a bit of hallucination, maybe, doesn't hurt. Nobody would recognize it's even wanted, maybe. So I think it's interesting to watch this space. We try to leverage the state of the art in research and even contribute to it in our own software pipelines in a very controlled way, which serves the purpose of our own product. And I'm excited to see what comes next. I'm also just an
Mhm.
advocate of people building and offering data sets. I think one big thing that is missing in 3D AI is a large scale, high quality data set. There's, for instance, Objaverse that is out there by, I think, the Allen Institute, 10 million data points, that is certainly cited a lot and used a lot to train AI, because let's not forget, AI can do magic in most cases, but needs to be trained on an
Yeah.
amazingly big, strong, ideally diverse and high quality data set. In 3D, that seems to be the missing link. Why don't we have text to 3D models that just blow everybody's mind? Yes, because it's hard to do. And also, it's a big difference between explicit and implicit representation. So, for instance, of course, we need, for what we do, and I think you as well, Ashley, with what you do at VNTANA and the customers that you work with, you need those explicit representations. You need a mesh to work with. You need to be able to modify, influence maybe that 3D asset, versus some of those neural approaches. It's implicit, right? And then you need to get creative to even make it visible. And so that,
Yeah.
I think, is still some opportunities to develop further, but it will come inevitably.
Yeah, and just for those where that are new to 3D, can you explain just what nerfs and Gaussian splats are? I mean, high level, if anybody has tried the Apple Vision Pro, you've seen some, but
Yeah, basically, it's a neural representation of objects, I would say. Nerve stands for neural radiance fields, for instance. So you try to leverage some of those properties to get to very quickly, actually, to a 3D model that, however, I would say lives in a AI model, and then it's difficult to, however, represent that in reality in meaningful ways that also can be used at an industrial scale, I would say. Maybe actually you have a better, easier definition of this, but that's how I would say it. Yeah.
yeah, I agree. It's being able to take real time images and get more of a
Sure.
3D effect. But from what I've seen, it's really great for environments, and it's really hard to extract an actual asset out of it. But very high level. And then we have one question: are airports using these scanners? So airports, they're massive. So that would kind of go back to being able to do 3D scanning to get the actual shape and mesh of the airport, but you probably don't need and aren't able to get the super high quality photorealistic 3D models that Covision is working on.
Yeah. Also, maybe if this was a point about the scanners for scanning the human as he goes through the gate, I would say that is somewhat similar technology, but also different.
Mm.
And of course, we should mention this as well. There's amazing companies out there who do scanning of humans, which is another topic altogether. I would say also an interesting field of research. Lots of stuff happening there as well, especially then with bringing AI motion to those avatars that have been scanned, and very important also to populate then everything that goes with mixed reality headsets, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I literally didn't miss my flight because of the face scanning. It was way faster in New York. But yeah, and so we're at about time. So thanks so much for joining. The last question, just obviously the technology is changing rapidly. How can a company stay ahead of the curve with all this? If they're just getting into it and they don't want to, invest in something and then it becomes obsolete quickly.
Yeah, I would say just like with any other technological advancements, the first point is information. So I would say if you're listening to this webinar, it's already a good start. Listening to you, Ashley, you're an absolute expert in the field, of course. Maybe talk to other companies that have done so. There's incredible material out there that not only us tech companies that we post, but actually there is companies from the several industries contributing to it. And then I would just say rolling up the sleeves and trying for yourself, I think, is always the best way to get into this, because then the ROIs, if you think about 3D scanning or creating 3D models from scratch with whichever method we're talking about, it's really industry dependent as well. And you need to find your sweet spot, what applies to your company, because maybe we do highest quality 3D scans, but maybe some companies not even interested in highest quality 3D scans. So what we deliver would be an overkill, whereas is other companies, maybe the high-end fashion company, it's actually appreciated. So the technology is out there. The pieces of the puzzle, I think, in terms of industry collaborations are coming together. We work with you with VNTANA. There's other companies working together with you guys as well, and it's becoming easier and easier. I'm glad where we are right now compared to maybe 2 years ago. And maybe in 2 years from now, who knows where we can be.
Great. And another question, any recommendation on LinkedIn 3D scanning modeling groups to join? I know there's a lot out there.
Yeah, I give the question to you, Ashley.
uh, I don't know. I'll send some out after this. I got to go through my LinkedIn, which is kind of a mess. But yeah, well, Franz, thanks so much for joining. This was great. And I would agree. I think you just get started. Tech can be scary, but you can start in incremental bits and POCs. And you don't want to be late. The fact that Amazon and Google is already supporting 3D. If your competitors have 3D on those platforms right now, they're beating you. Like we're seeing a higher conversion rate with 3D. We're seeing higher click-through rates. I always think about the analogy, Gary Vaynerchuk built a huge media company, but he was one of the first to understand email marketing. This is obviously 20 years ago, and blew up his family's wine business to a multi-million-dollar company because nobody was doing email marketing yet, right? So you don't want to be the last one to jump on the bandwagon. But yeah, thank you all for joining. We'll continue to answer questions on text and talk to you soon, Franz.
Yeah, talk to you, Ashley. Bye.
Bye.